So I've put up Dr. Ashish Pandey's profile here. He's Associate Professor at Shailesh J. Mehta School of Management at IIT Bombay. Over to you, Ashish.
Oh, thanks very much, Ramya and Indem, for organizing this, and thanks very much all the scholars who are participating in this reflection, and I will call it satsang because this is a search for truth. What is the reality and what is the truth about the Indian management? So thanks very much. So I was thinking about some of these aspects of Indian management, and as we are thinking about Indian management, discussing about it, I can certainly recall few of the things which were on the different aspects of the Indian knowledge system. So starting from the work of Jagdish Chandra Basu, who worked on the life in plants and the feelings, he recognizes the influence of Swami Vivekananda on his work. Similarly, his work on the mental fatigue also in the description recognizes the impact of the Vivekananda and the Indian philosophy. Prafulla Chandra Ray's work on the Hindu chemistry, and Prafulla Chandra Ray was the founder of the Bengal Chemicals. His three students were the first, or four students were the first directors of Indian Institute of Technology. So you can imagine the kind of the status of this professor was, whose four students went on to become the directors of the four first IITs in India. His work on the Hindu chemistry, where he draw insights from the metallurgy related knowledge system prevalent in the Indian traditional knowledge. Yadunath Sinhaji's work on the Indian philosophy, Indian psychology, and not a book, but I think 6 or 7 volumes on the Indian psychology. Rajbali Pandeyji's work on the sanskar. There are 16 sanskars in the Indian tradition. According to one school, according to Gautama, there are 48 sanskars. So different rishis have given, but the 16 are most prominent, and they were being correlated. They were explained in terms of their socio-economic, in their socio-psychological impact. What is the nuances of the spiritual, psychological, and sociological aspects of these sanskars? So this work was published by Dr. Rajbali Pandey. In 1880s, sometime I think in 1884, there was a debate in India when we should give the should Indians be given holiday, and there was a debate, and there were Indian panchangs, the Indian time assessment, the timetables. They were referred, and they were more in number because some panchangs are based on moment of sun, some are based on moment of sun and moon both. So there is some little variation. There is now we know that there is a scientific interpretation of all this, but in order to on the excuse of panchang not being aligned, Sunday was declared as the weekly holiday, though the Indian system prescribes the holidays in the 15-day cycles, or on the full moon day and the half moon day, and that's why you will see a lot of our festivals fall on that. The excuse was that Indians cannot agree on these time series. But now we know, and that the time calculations on the Indian calendar is certainly much more sophisticated than the time calculations done in the Western calendars, the contemporary so-called the Indian calendars. If you want to know more about it, you can have a look at this website. This is our project in IIT Bombay, and a lot of Indian thoughts, Indian concepts are presented in a scholarly manner. You can check some of these things. My idea is not to say that Indian systems are better, more sophisticated, etc., etc. I'm not at all claiming that. What I'm claiming is, what I'm submitting is that and all these references of Professor Yadunath Sinha's reference, or Professor Rajbali Pandey's reference, all these work, or Hindu chemistry's reference, all these works were conducted before or right after the independence. and somehow we have lost the plot in between. Ideally, these things, and this was the ideal. I'm saying ideally because the ideal behind setting up the Indian Institute of Management was to do something about the Indian education and Indian management research, which is relevant for the country. But somehow this stream was almost lost. And then we have some work in between by Professor S.K. Chakravarti or Professor J.P.P. Sinha we have talked about. I would like to share two things from the book which I had opportunity to co-edit with Professor Bhawuk and Professor Pawan Budwar. If we look at the Indian management research, there can be amic and atic research, and there is also a pseudo-amic and pseudo-amic research. Some constructs are atomistic, individual focused in nature, and some are holistic in nature. And if we look at what most of the studies, in which quadrant most of our studies fall, they are the atic and atomistic constructs. So even with this simple classification, we can understand that how much we are losing out in terms of potential of the Indian management research. That even if we look at the current classification, most of the research is focused on the atic research, and it's also atomistic research, mostly individual. So management scholarship has not put in sufficient effort in India to understand the collective systems, and of course the understanding about the individual focused constructs are even fewer in number. In our work, reviewing the major kind of scholarly efforts on the Indian management side, Indian management context, what we sort of, it's all conclusions are tentative, but at the moment we reach to this kind of a framework where if we have to understand the Indian management, we need to certainly look at the core cultural ideals, Panchakoshas, Karma Yoga, Indian psychology related, all other construct on which Professor Bhawuk has done a lot of writing, and Indian history, both have to be understood, both have to be embraced. But that is not going to tell or unravel the Indian management. We need to look at the institutional uniqueness and hybridity as well. This uniqueness, institutional uniqueness and hybridity has come up because of the colonial influences, because of the global influences, both. There are not only colonial influences, there are global influences as well. And all these influences they cannot be denied. We cannot undo those things. And certainly globalization is not something on which we can give the reverse care. So that has influence on the nature of our institutions. For example, Indian administrative system. Indian administrative system was started, actually the foundation was laid by the British civil services framework. But then gradually the role of the services had to be transformed. Earlier, the role of the collector, Indian Administrative Service Officer, was understood to be revenue, custodian of the government's revenue. Now, if you look at the role of the collector, they have to manage at least 50 schemes which are related to public welfare, and their major responsibilities for that. There is a very major policy initiative in terms of the aspirational district is going on. The most backward district in India are identified, and there the best officers are appointed, and the constant monitoring takes place on the developmental indicators. So you can see, though we are still calling it collector, though we are still calling it Indian Administrative Service, the nature of institutions has gone through transformation. There are certain things bound to remain, which we can say remnant of the colonization, but we can't undo some of those. Similar thing is there in the Indian education system. We can keep criticizing the Indian education system, but there are certain things, some structures, some practices, which have become part of the system, and we cannot undo some of these things. Similarly, we can say about the Indian judiciary system or democracy. So to me, Indian management is not a revisionist idea. Indian management is the idea for synthesis. What we need to do recognize that there are a lot of Indian constructs. So being oblivious to some of these realities is a problem. Not looking at and all three levels in terms of the cultural ideals, in terms of the institutional hybridity, in terms of the people behavior, we need a different kind of research which is not taking place mostly in the Indian schools. To understand the Indian ideals, we need to study the Shastras. We need to look at the Indian worldview. We need to look at what are the different knowledge traditions already available. It is there in the hydrology, it is there in the forestry, agriculture, architecture, a lot of things are there. And until management embraces the whole knowledge field wholeheartedly about the different fields and consider themselves management scholarship, consider themselves management scholars and teachers, they do not consider, until they consider themselves responsible for not only development of the business corporations, but also responsible for the social development. They take interest in the institution building, they take interest in the nation building. These things will not make us these things will not make us shake. We will not be values, many of these things. So until we plug our Indian management scholarship, unplug slightly from the corporate and plug it towards the social development, nation building, we will not be able to look at some of these concepts. We will not be able to understand and appreciate some of these concepts. So management scholarship, which is focused on, which is dedicated to understanding the cultural knowledge captured in many languages in India, all the languages in India. In fact, all the languages are the storehouse of knowledge, and they are the major insights about life and about many other things. External things are there. Second aspect is we need to have systematic and genuine effort to understand the institutional fabric of India and institutional behavior of India. I know there are 2 minutes and I'll be concluding that. Yeah. Institutional framework requires macro level studies combined with the grounded studies, grounded research frame. Then only we will be able to understand the issues of caste, issues of gender, issues of the multiple religiosity, their interactions, different institutions, religious and social institutions, how they are working. Just for example, I was doing yesterday I was doing on a field visit in the Coimbatore, in the Isha Foundation. Their outreach program on the foreign farmer producer organization, FPO, has not only made very successful FPOs, but it has resulted into a policy insights. That policy insight is captured in a document called Wellingary FPO model. Earlier, the government used to emphasize that you make the self-help group, you work there as a 3 years, and then you work on the FPO. Isha's work has made people recognize that a starting point is not to start with the self-help group. A starting point is to identify the directors and committed people in the society and have the institutional representatives to handhold them for 3 years, and then the FPO can become much more efficient in delivering what they are supposed to do. These are the kind of work we need to understand. By the way, all these things are happening. Many of these things are going on. It is management scholars who have to go out, search, study, and publish these. There is no problem I see in terms of the multiple flavor of indigeneity. Certainly, there can be multiple societal perspectives. There are different shades in the India, and Indian system anyway was not looking for the uniformity. So we have some of the very contrary looking from the outside systems, like Vedanta is different, Sankhya is different, Vaisheshik is different. They have their purpose, but they also have their different worldview. So there's no problem with that, but we need to start that. And for that, we need to have some, my last 1 minute is dedicated to invite the senior experienced scholars, management academicians, management teachers and educators in this forum, that this is not going to happen just by organizing the conferences. We need to recognize young faculty members have to show their output, have to publish their output. And if we keep on insisting on publishing in certain kind of A or A star journals, we will not going to have some original work. Why anyone should put his career on the risk to publish something original? We have experience of doing this. One of my scholars is working on the responsible leadership. She did a very thorough grounded work to understand what is the responsible leadership meaning in India? What is the meaning of that in India? And we found some interesting insights, but we don't see A star or A journals interested in this kind of work. We need to develop our own journals. If we cannot develop our own journals, at least we can identify 10 journals. I can propose Vikalpa, IMB Review, Journal of Human Values, Decision. We can identify 8-10, South Asian Journal of Business Studies. These journals, we have, Professor Bhawuk and I had an opportunity to co-edit this, one of the special issue on the Indian positive scholarship in the South Asia. We can identify some of these journals where we recognize that they are open for the indigenous ideas, grounded research, indigenous research. And if we give this recognition, I'm sure a lot of theory building and a lot of insightful work will be coming up, which will be useful. Otherwise, my last sentence is, anyways, nation is changing. Anyways, India is on a path which is on at the growth, prosperity, and a lot of great things are happening. There are 1 lakh startups. How many of know what are the better theories about the startup in India? So these things keep happening, but who will be missing out in this journey to be relevant is Indian management scholars and Indian management educators. I hope this thing doesn't come true. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Ashish.